right, Loren. A little disorganized and a little disjunct in terms of like the character of the sounds working together. And I think that there are some instruments in which you got the roles a little abstracted, or perhaps just like there are some more useful ways that you could be assigning different roles to different instruments, right? So so let's start with that. All right. So the first thing I'll mention here is that you have the contrabassoon in kind of a higher position, right? And you've got in the first place you got tenor trombone in tenor clef with this really low F showing here. And usually if you're going to score below the staff in tenor clef scoring, in for a tenor instrument like tenor trombone, bassoon, cello, which have tenor registers, you usually just switch over to like bass clef. In essence, you've got this triple unison here of tenor trombone, bass trombone, and contrabassoon. And even though they're playing pianissimo, that is just going to be an incredibly heavy sound, right? So like you want this to be really dignified and smooth and gorgeous, and the scoring of it is not bad actually, right? So maybe you could just lighten it up, right? What if the contrabassoon were doubling the double basses, and one or two bassoons were doubling the cellos, and then you just let the trombones just take a break, right? I mean, in Beethoven style scoring, which I think you aspire to here, to a degree, you would be leaving the trombones to like a more harmonic role, more most of the time, rather than necessarily doing these kind of long pedal basses. Though there are exceptions. And then here you've got some random percussion. When you're doing these orchestration challenges, you can leave out extraneous percussion instruments that aren't going to be used, right? So then you can like make you have more vertical space in between the bars, right? Okay. So that would be my first piece of advice. Now, my second piece of advice on this intro is just the basic problem that in assigning such a fast speed to the it says 60 here, but it almost feels like it was faster than that, and maybe it's just because of the way that it's scored or something. But yeah, it just felt like like you were in a hurry to get the introduction over with, right? Which I'm sure you weren't. But I mean, what was the tempo on the template that I set? It was like 40, right? And what was the tempo that Spencer Myer was doing? It was like half that. It was like 20, right? So the problem with having such a fast introduction is that it makes the part that follows feel like cut time, right? So if you think of like that, like this being like about 60. Dun, dun. Sorry, I'm going way too fast. Dun, 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 bum, dun, 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 dun. All right. So I'm just keep clicking this 60. Da 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 bum bum. See how that like this the reference of this makes this feel like it's still like all of these are like 16th notes. You're still in 2/4, right? So by slowing this way down, we don't connect these two by tempo. All right, so that would be that's the next thing that I'm recommending in addition to sort of letting go of the trombones here and making it more about bassoons. If you want that sound, that kind of nice thick lower rich sound, because like this is just going to be so heavy, right? Just with the trombones. So get rid of the trombones, make it much lighter. Have your bassoons and contrabassoons do their job, and slow this down so this can be beautiful and smooth and graceful. Now the next query is like scoring slurs. Now you withheld scoring any kind of slurs anywhere except for right here, right? So, yeah, maybe just think about going way slower, and then just thinking about the bow going up and down, right? With like, or sorry, down and up, I should say. So down, up, down, up, down, and then you should just write in, like if your no, if your notation software doesn't play back a turn, just write in the turn. Da 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 da. Maybe even have like a fermata here, so it's nice and slow. Down, up, down, up, and this would absolutely have slurs on it, right? Absolutely put slurs on that. And then just have the whole string section working together. Down bow, up bow. I don't want you to mark the bowing, but I just want you to think about the slurs and the different notes, right? So this is going to be down bow. This is going to be slurred, right? So up bow, down, slurring forward. Then this is up bow, down, up, slur there on the dotted rhythm, and then down, up, right? And then you just got a really, really nice sound. And on these low notes, you could even, you could have something like in my orchestration of this, I had the cellos playing these low notes and the double bass doing pizzicato, right? Going just sort of plucking to kind of keep it so like you could have one group of instruments just holding as a pedal without any kind of, without re-articulating, just holding. And then you could have the other one just kind of like putting a little pizzicato or some other kind of pluck or emphasis or something. All right. So now here, you suddenly add this da 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 dum. So I just have to point out that this, like, there are two things that could happen here. One is that the sound of the flutes will just absorb into the sound of the first violins. Now, in the mock-up, you can hear them fine, but in a real-life situation, even in unison like this with the flutes, there's a danger with this kind of simplistic scoring with the violins being the more forceful, the more present kind of sound, that their rich resonance, their overtones would just absorb the flutes above them, right? Because the flutes would just lock right into that. So you have to accept that danger, right? That quality of tone will just, it will provide some kind of beautiful sweetening above at best, perhaps, right? Like go listen to some Mozart sonatas, symphonies, like the the G minor, right? The second G minor. There are a few instances where obviously he intends the sound of the flute to get absorbed into the orchestra, into the sound of the the first violins an octave below. So, or the flute, I should say, not flutes. So yeah, and then of course, like if you're going to go slur, do the same thing here in these flutes. But if you want them to stand out more, if the players make them stand out more, then just be aware that this, that will just really feel more sudden, right? The sudden introduction of that upper voice. It's not going to be a smooth thing. It's sort of almost like an added kind of emphasis. So if you had wanted like a real smooth kind of statement here, where you just really are making a like this real formal, kind of just really laying it on the line and just trying to set up what's going to be happening in the rest of this excerpt, then this sort of almost feels like frosting on top of frosting, right? So I would just say watch out for just like throwing in like an extra thing here and an extra thing there, whether or not that is in the character of the music. And one last thing too is that, like, in addition to adding slurs and making it more smooth and everything else, you may want to push forward, right? So that by the time you, like the peak of dynamically, as it rises, it will just naturally want to be louder, and you can give the players permission to get a little bit louder and really go all the way up to here, maybe even a little ritardando to a fermata there, and then back to a tempo again, da 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 da, with a little bit of diminuendo coming out of it, right? And then that just gives the phrase some shape. All right, so does the intro set the mood effectively? That's one of my criterion. And I would say, like, with those fixes, clarifying your intentions with this, I would say actually not bad, right? Now let's move forward. So does the melody start with elegance? I would say that, like, it has the potential to, but the way that you scored it, it just really is choppy because there is no slurring in the strings, right? But there could be. You could go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. You see what I'm saying? Like you could just really connect those notes a little bit more, right? And of course, like maybe right in here, this could all be connected portato, right? You could have tenuto marks connected by a slur, so you get this right? Kind of a feeling to it. And then right in here, it's a little acrobatic, the way that you have scored the cello, right? And notice that you have got double bass is just kind of sitting around not doing anything. What if the double bass were to take this, just playing a short note or a pizzicato or something, boom, and then that lets the cello just go da, and maybe slur this as well, da da. You know what I mean? So you just have that. You have the you have more grace, more slurring. And just by the way, just to remind you, Loren, you don't have to have the source piano staves in your entry. You just cut them out. Like we're going to be looking at them however many times, right? We're going to be remembering what they were in how many different entries, right? So if they're in every single entry, then it's just too repetitive. People can go back and take a look at the Spencer Myer's video if they want to be reminded of what it was, right? So you can just cut this out. I know what it is. Everybody else will know. All right, so just maybe just cut out some of the gymnastics by giving this note to the double bass and so on. Now, one thing that once again I think you're overdoing it, and that is, like, if you want to talk about acrobatic, this right here as it's scored for tenor trombone is like you know what I mean, and it's just really, it is really not a like a very idiomatic trombone part, right? However, it would be absolutely perfect for bassoon, beautiful for bassoon, right? It just really would fit that instrument well. Or like these upper notes right in here would fit clarinet beautifully, right? And like you don't get out of range of the clarinet until you get down to these C's, right? So those C's are out of range. So, but maybe there's some way of resketching it, rewriting it, rejigging it, so that it all fits much, much better. But maybe you don't need any kind of doubling at all from winds or trombone. I would just say that this, the actual results of how you scored this would just, the trombone would just be, you couldn't hear anything, right? But it's sort of made a little bit more difficult by the fact that, like, when you get to the end of this section, you have to sort of restart everything, right? Because this is just the introduction. Now, this is a completely new section, so you should be marking, like, new dynamics, and even if it's the same thing, right? So we're going from piano to piano dolce with the melody, right? And the counter melody, right? We just want those parts to really have, because like a lot of times people are going to just jump back to this, like they might work on the intro a little bit in rehearsal, and then they'll just keep working on this beginning part a little bit. So they're going to be jumping back to the beginning of the first statement, right? So it's helpful to have the markings, the dynamic markings there too. All right. So let's say that you followed my advice. You've smoothed this out. You have made the second violins match. You have made the cellos a little bit less acrobatic, and you've increased the, you've added to the role of the double basses and so on. And let's say that you have maybe used a little bit of a little bit of bassoon, a little bit of clarinets instead of the tenor trombones, which are just really heavy. And I mean, I love this little bit of timpani right in here. It gets a little repetitive though, like it just sort of becomes a bit predictable as it goes on. Maybe this could all just be pizzicato in the double basses, an octave higher than it's scored here. So let's say that you've done all that. What else could you do with it? Well, I mean, I think that some of what's going on here in the cellos could be scored over to viola, and like the part could just be more integrated and a little fuller and so on, right? So, so that you just have, like, because otherwise the violas are kind of like not doing anything, not really contributing very much. All right, but if you were to do that, then I would say yes, the melody starts with elegance. Yes, there's a natural flow to the accompaniment. Yes, it expands without clogging up. Yes, there's a natural transition to octaves. All right, so I would consider those boxes ticked. So now let's continue on. And here I would say, the contrast with the theme is really nice. You've got unison flutes and the piccolo an octave higher. That's very cool. And here you have bassoon answering. Now, is it one or two bassoons here? Right? Like, how many bassoons? Like, just because you didn't mark it, with two voices doesn't mean that the score reader is going to think that this is just one instrument, right? In fact, you could just save all the extra stems and extra voices just by marking this A2. So that would be A2, right? So that lets us know with two instruments playing the same line, right? And you could do that here too. Where you get into trouble is this. Like, if you get your trombone player who's able to do this, I mean, it's just like, it's soft and it's nimble and it's fast and it's on the sort of this kind of lower register. And it just doesn't really fit the trombone that well. Okay, so just better to leave it with the bassoon, which is absolutely perfect. Like, unison bassoons here would be just, would be all you need. You don't need these, and once again, like, this is just too low. Like, look at how low the scoring is for the tenor clef, right? This should be bass clef if you're going to score down here. Okay, so let's say that you do that and you clean this up. Then I would absolutely say that you have ticked the boxes in my next set of criteria, right? So, does it contrast with the theme? Yes, it does, because it's winds, following these strings, these beautiful, lush strings that you've scored here. And is there contrast between lines? Yes, there is. There was a entry, I think, in one of the website evaluations that will be released in a couple of weeks, I think, where these parts were like on top of each other. Like, there was this was dropped an octave and this was raised an octave, so it was just they were right in the same register, and so we kind of couldn't tell. It was really hard to tell them apart, right? But here, we have the contrast of register and color, which is great. Did you need harmonic support? Well, you didn't add any, and it works fine, right? So it is an optional thing, right? So that ticks the boxes there. All right, now here we get into this area, and I'm wondering whether or not you were maybe running out of time, or just kind of, just sort of thinking it over and didn't really have time to work this out, right? Because what's needed here is a real emphatic color of line. We are pushing into this, right? It's something that really needs some security and cohesiveness of scoring, right? And I feel that, like, right here, just like bassoon and trombone unison, a color that doesn't really support the strings right in here. And then you have the cellos coming in. They don't have any support from below in any kind of string texture or color. There's no added strength here on the or inner voices or harmony or anything being added. So those are all elements you could do to address some of those concerns I have in my criteria, like harmonic density, right? Emphatic color of line could be achieved even just by scoring this right in here in octaves, right? So you could just even say like divisi octaves, and then or you could have the first violins an octave higher, and then this line right in here being scored down on the second violins, right? So that they're playing octaves together. And then maybe while you're at it, you can give them some slurs, right? Just to continue the smoothness. Now here, you don't really need slurs. If you want this all to be da 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 da, but this could also be slurred. Da da. I think I slurred mine as well. But here you could go up down up down up down. Right? Yeah, I think that just works absolutely perfectly and gives a beautiful shape to the line and fits the crescendo really nicely. So let's say that you were to thicken this up with adding some middle voices here, maybe in the violas, maybe firming this up with this melody up with a participation of the second violins, and give this to the cellos and the basses and so on, or add. Once again, I don't think you need tenor trombone at all here. I think the bassoon is fine. So bassoon coming in here, cellos and basses working together on that, and then I think that this would tick some of those boxes, right? Now here we're getting to an area where I feel like once again I think maybe you ran out of time. You needed a little bit more time to work on this. But yeah, so here we have a very simple interpretation, pretty straightforward, and it works pretty well. Interpretation of that next bar, bar 12, right? And you're going dun, 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 and it's just it all works great. I do like the down, up, down bowing right in here. And I think the voicing and everything of all these chords stretched across here is fine. But there's a question, if you are going to build this up, make it richer, and have this crescendo and everything, do you want to continue with that force? Da 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 dun 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 mezzo forte, or do you want to suddenly drop, right? Just the way that Beethoven does. Da 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 dun dun dun. See the difference there? So it's just with Beethoven, the terrace dynamics are really common. He'll have a crescendo and he'll suddenly follow it with the piano, right? But here in the 21st century, we have to sort of justify those decisions and clarify them for modern performers. So here you'd want to say piano subito, right? Just to really let the player know that you were doing a crescendo and then suddenly soft, right? And just maybe a little bit more clarification about what everybody's dynamic is in this section. Right, and then here you answer with brass. So here is where I think, hey, brass, you got them, right? And I think you were thinking a bit about using natural brass, and this doesn't. There's some Beethoven touches to it, but it doesn't really feel like a Beethoven period score, right? So I don't think you need to fiddle around with horns in F, horns basso in C, right? In C basso is actually how you should write it out. 2 horns in C basso. So yeah, and you wouldn't be adding a key signature to it if it were a natural horn, right? So you could just have 4 horns in F, right? And then score this out any way you like, right? Just you can make it more coherent, more more chordal, more supportive of this idea right in here, more fully worked out, right? And not just have one voice per staff, right? We have 1 voice per staff in all of these staves where we have the potential to have 2 instruments. So I'm sure you could fill this in better. And then, then we've got the alto, tenor, and bass trombone. And, and here you just look at how low this is. Very few pro trombonists would want to read that low. They would want this entire part in bass clef, pretty much. And there's if you're not going to be scoring in the tenor register with tenor trombone, just leave the whole thing in bass clef. But here I think that if you just, this kind of bow kind of thing is not too idiomatic for trombonists slurring this all together. In fact, they don't really slur it; they sort of connect it, right? Unless everything is on the same slide position, right? In which case they can slur it. But I think that if you're going to go down, up, down with the bowing here, then just make this ta ta ta, right? Da 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 da, right? And then here you bring in your lower winds, lower strings, low brass, and here I think that everything feels upside down here, and I'm not hearing the dun dun, those notes, right? The B flat and the C, right? And which leads to the A, right? So where is the B flat and C of the melody, right? So I'm looking around for them, and I'm not seeing them anywhere, right? So maybe that was just you just sort of ran out of time, and or maybe you were focusing. I'm noticing there are a few bars past the screen that I've got selected here. Maybe you were focusing more on that, and you didn't get quite time to put this together because possibly you were thinking of sending me a longer entry at a different level. So I don't know. But anyway, so this absolutely needs to be rewritten, this last bar, because it's just it doesn't really carry the idea of the music forward. It's just a couple of it's just what it is, right? So it needs to be a little bit more reshaped. So with all of those caveats, I would say that somebody could sort of listen to this and say, oh well, there's a lot wrong, blah blah blah. But see, I'm listening to the parts about it that are right. I'm observing the stuff in it that is workable towards, and you have the thread going through this whole thing of, the potential of a pretty good score. It just is, you just need to fill in a few places. You need to add slurs. You need to not neglect your violas. You need to not overuse your trombone and so on. So it's just little things like that. You fix all those things, you put it together, I think you're going to have, a really strong score. Okay? So anyway, so that's my thoughts on it, Loren. And and it was great looking at your oratorio a few weeks ago. That's a really great piece of music. I really enjoyed checking it out and so on. So so look, don't give up with this. Don't get discouraged. I enjoyed looking at this, and I would really love to see your take on next year's orchestration challenge, because it is a completely different piece than this. It is like music that is delivered on a perfumed cloud. It is just an amazing piece of music, and by a composer you would never expect would have written it in that style at that time. Okay, so I will keep my counsel. I will keep the secret on what that is, but just look forward to that, and wow, it would be great to see your take on that. So thanks so much for that, and for your support of the channel. It just continues to amaze me, and just sort of changes my whole idea about human nature, about how composers are making it possible for me to spread this kind of educational material and opportunities to thousands of composers over time. How many hundreds of scores have I looked at now in these orchestration challenges? And I just never get tired of it. So it's just a real blessing to me. So thank you for that, Loren. And and please enter the orchestration challenge next year. See everybody soon.